Hello and welcome back to Satisfactory. In our last episode, we set up the aluminum refining process and hopefully have made quite a few alkyd aluminum plates because I've been gone from the base for about an hour or more and collecting more hard drives. While I was out and about, I set one of them up to analyze, so we should be able to pick out some new recipes here and then move on with further parts of the game. That is, seeing if we actually did, in fact, pick up or get enough aluminum plates. So neither of these recipes are ones that I'm planning on using for anything, and most certainly not the smart plating because, well, we're done with all of that for now. But I guess I'll just pick one because it doesn't matter. Okay. So we are scanning. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go upstairs and see if we have the aluminum we need for this milestone. I've picked up all the materials we need for the next two milestones, the last two milestones, and so we really just need the aluminum for them, which is a total of 300. It looks like we have used. Oh no! I completely forgot I did this. It means I've been gone for an hour and a half. And nothing has happened. I stopped the train. I thought I stopped the train. Timetable? Locomotive? I did stop the train. So we used all the bauxite that we had. Oh, yeah, the train's right there. Why is the train over there? Maybe it rolled back downhill? I don't know. Okay. But the train... Yeah, I stopped the train a couple episodes ago because it was just running without unloading any bauxite. So, because it was full. And so we've used all the bauxite that I had, which was quite a lot to be fair. But we could have more aluminum sheets than we are going to have here. So hopefully this is all working as intended. It would be nice. And, oh, we have lots. We need a total of 300 for the last two milestones. And if I gathered everything else correctly... Boingy? Boingy? Yeah, these guys serve as... Yeah, it's laughing at me or something now. Okay. Enough of that. And I took damage because I bounced and fell. It serves me right, I suppose. Okay, so I have a box here. I went and stashed, so put 100 of that away, pick up all of, I don't have room for all of these. Let's see, let's put away some other stuff. Couple of these, one of those, maybe one of these, couple of these, temporarily. Not anything we need to do permanently, because we're going to spend all this stuff here. Hopefully this is correct. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So we're going to get advanced aluminum production.
Milestone reached. Advanced aluminum parts can now be produced, which are necessary to build the Miner Mark III. Batteries can be used as a fuel source for vehicles.
So we got the turbo motors, the heat sinks, the Miner Mark III, which is built from, I think, both of those items, or at least the turbo motors, and the batteries that we've been using as we've picked them up from the random hard drive sites as fuel. Okay, so I want to pick up all the stuff that I just chucked in here. I don't want those necessarily. This, and this. Over to that. The rest of these, so 500 rubber and 100 aluminum. Plus 100 quick wire will give us the last milestone that we need. But I can't load the items in yet anyway. The other thing that I did is this other box, which is a bunch of junk that I picked up while adventuring that I don't need, at least not right now, and I will probably shred whenever I set a shredder up again. But I can't set a shredder up under here because it's too tall for this 20 meter, well, 21 meter? It's not exactly 20 meters. It's a little bit more, but anyway, that's that. So we could set up an area down at the end to make the next few items, specifically being automating beacons, because we need them, and automating cartridges. We also could set up turbo motors. Yeah, we need heat sinks for turbo motors. And the rest of the stuff must be in some of the other. There's our miner Mark IIIs. Heat sinks are here. There's an alternate heatsink recipe that I'm looking for. Could also automate... Where do we get supercomputers at? Do we not have those yet? Is that in the one that I have selected? Did I miss it? Can we not make supercomputers? No, we should be able to make supercomputers, right? Maybe not. No, because that's computers. So they must be later. Means we can't actually make supercomputers. I could have sworn we could. Huh. Okay. Check something out real quick here. I could have sworn they were here someplace. But I guess not. Okay, well, you guys are probably yelling at me as you're watching this episode. But, the other things that I want to be able to make are... radio control units. We can't make those either, apparently. I don't see them here, at least. I could have sworn we could make some of this stuff. Why am I... These are items that I've seen the recipes for on the website, on the Satisfactory calculator website. And I could have sworn they were makeable, but they must be in Tier 8 that we don't have yet. Which is unfortunate, because I was planning on making them. And I have no idea when Tier 8 is coming out. So, I've done some work on how to... what I want to plan for making... for the final... sort of the final factory. And as I've talked about before... Some of the plan is to move all of the smelting upstairs. That almost certainly will include all of the limestone production, basically anything that needs to be done in a refinery, as well as actually smelting it. But these can't be put down here, which is part of the reason why the refineries are going upstairs. They need more. They need like 32 meters, or no, 20 something meters, and they only got 20 here. So let's actually go upstairs where we have the headroom here. Hello, birdie. Fly away. Fly away. Because they have this tall smokestack here. And let's start looking at the recipes that I want to lay out up here. So starting at the far end, because that's where the copper is, where we've kind of temporarily set up copper, I want to do some... pull up my list again here, and I don't have exact numbers yet of what I want to build, but I know of what I want to build. I just don't know how many of each. So instead of doing regular copper ingots, I'm actually going to use the copper alloy ingot that is done here in the foundry. And the reason for that is to use some of the iron in the production of copper. So we have, instead of using 1 copper ore to make 1 copper ingot, instead we're going to use 15 ore to make 20 ingots. And it also produces so much faster than the other one. Is the regular recipe is 30 per minute. This is 100 per minute, so this is producing 3 times as much, more than 3 times as much. Or just, wait, does that tell me how much power? I always forget this tells me how much power. Not that much power. Okay. 4 times as much power. So I guess it's not any more efficient electrically, but in terms of space it is. And since we're probably talking about like 6 or so of these, it ends up being pretty good, because otherwise we'd have like 18 or 20 of the other of just the smelters, and they take up more space, but they don't take up 3 times as much space. So I know that that's something that I want to do. I shouldn't have just deconstructed that. I intended to just do this here. I think I do want to have the alternate recipe here for uranium. We are going to set up a nuclear reactor and a nuclear chain, so I figure we might as well get those alternate recipes as well for that. You know what I should do? I should just build one of... So the problem I have with building one of each building is the stupid power thing, where they start yelling at you because you don't have enough power. So I think, well, I'll just do it anyway. In fact, or they don't have power connected at all, I should say. But in fact, I should just connect power to them. Let's see, and that's the 2 smelters and the refinery. And then we have I'll do the constructor first over here. And then an assembler. Oh, that's crazy. I'm trying to use the control key to do the alignment, and it's going a little bit insane. So those are the 6 buildings that we can make stuff at. The oil extractor is a mine, basically. The water extractor is a mine, basically. And then obviously 3 miners now. But those are the 6 buildings we can make stuff at. I think the power is on both sides for some of these. Okay. Let's just quickly do a power pole here. I'm just going to do a quick power connection for this one and for this one. Just so we have something connected here that I can look at and we can talk about easily enough. We just connect to that same one. Okay, good. So, as I already talked about, I want to do the copper alloy ingots. But for Caterium, which I'm belting in here, I'm only going to do the regular smelter. The other Caterium recipe, the pure Caterium, which is done at a refinery here, uses a lot more space, isn't that much more efficient. It's 2 ore to 1 ingot here, whereas this one is 3 ore to 1 ingot, so it's not like great, but it uses a lot more space and a lot more power for not much benefit. And it's also not that much faster, I don't think. Maybe slower. This is 12, and this is 15, so it's actually slower, uses more space, more power, and doesn't reduce our Caterium consumption by that much. And in fact, even if so, we only really need like well, we have 2 normal Caterium nodes out there. That's all we need for what we're going to do here. I'm fairly certain. So we're going to do that. And then the next thing that I want to look at is, of course, iron, which in this case I am going to do the pure iron recipe. It uses 35 iron ore per minute to make 65 parts. So that's like 1 to 2 as opposed to 1 to 1. Not quite, but close enough. It uses water, of course, but we're going to pipe a large amount of water up here anyway. And water is fairly cheap to move. I mean, for anything horizontal, it's free, other than building the pipes, of course. and anything vertical, it's 4 megawatts per 20 meters. So it's not worth it to fret over. But the fact that this produces 65 per minute as opposed to 30 and the default smelter is very tempting to me. There also is an iron alloy ingot here, but it uses a lot of copper, and we're going to pretty much need all the I think we're going to need, anyway, pretty much all the copper we have available right here. There is another node way down at the end by all the coal and stuff, but I don't see the point in doing the this alloy ingot because it's not as beneficial, it's not as productive as the pure one is. What else do we have? Kind of base ingredient wise. Ah, yes. We also have the steel alternatives here. There's another one for compacted coal, I think, that we actually just saw at the M.A.M. a few minutes ago. But the solid steel is the one that is by far the best. It's the one that everyone kind of picks, the one that everyone rates the best. And even though it takes the extra step of making the iron ingots, in this case the pure iron ingots in the refinery, even though it takes that extra step here, instead of it being 1 iron plus 1 coal equals 1 steel, it's 2 iron plus 2 coal equals 3 steel. And I think it's also much faster. It's 60 parts per minute versus 45. Well, it's not much faster, but yes. 3 to 3 is 3, and in this case it's 2 to 2 and 2 is 3. So you get some savings here on the iron use as well as the coal use, which means just more coal for power if nothing else, and you end up with a lot better of a process here. So that's what I'm going to do for the steel. What else do we have at this kind of low level? What's the next lowest level thing? I think that's it. Yeah, we're not going to do this. We're going to use the copper alloy. The aluminum we are already doing, but we're actually using the alternate aluminum that's made in the constructor or the smelter. It's in the smelter, I think, which we set up over there when we set up the aluminum now. Yeah, the pure aluminum. Actually, we're using both, aren't we? I think we're using both. But to simplify the whole silica thing, this one makes a lot of sense. I may end up using a mixed thing like we've done over there for the aluminum as well, just so that I use the silica that's up here and don't have to belt it around. I think it's probably okay to just do that. This recipe isn't like that much better than the other one, so it's kind of worth it. And we talked about this, I think, last time or the time before when I was setting up this section. I see that the pod is about to return, so we could head back down to... Well, I'll wait. I'll wait until the end of the episode to go down and do this. Otherwise, we already talked about the other ones here, so I'm actually going to remove this building because we don't need it anymore. We've talked about everything in it. The same thing this one. We've talked about everything in there. I'm going to remove that. Refinery, we have a lot to talk about with. But let's kind of move on to kind of the base items. Things like iron plates and such. Well, iron plates actually I'm not going to be able to make here because I'm going to use the steel... What are they called? Not the coated. The steel coated plates. This is a little bit more efficient on the iron per iron plate. It does require a little bit of plastic, but I'm not that worried about it. But 3 steel ingots, which is effectively 2 iron ingots and 2 coal, but 2 iron ingots makes 18 iron plates. Versus here, where iron plates are 3 ingots per 2 plates. That's just an insane number to me. And it's incredibly tempting, even though it does require a little bit of plastic as well. We're going to have way more oil than we actually need, and we'll actually be able to make some fuel-based oil products to have some fuel generators as part of the final base build. So that's iron plates. Iron rods. Instead, we're going to do the steel rod recipe here. Kind of for the same reason. 1 steel ingot is 2 iron and 2 coal. The normal recipe for the iron rods is 1 ingot to 1 rod. So this is effectively 2 ingots plus 2 coal, to be fair, to 4 rods. So that's getting twice as much per iron, but you have to throw the coal in there, of course. And also it makes more than 3 times as much, so that saves us on electricity as well, especially when it's made in the same building anyway. It's kind of a easy guess here. Screws, we're going to do the steel screws. Like there's, again, 1 steel beam makes 52 screws, so that's 5 beams per minute makes 260 screws per minute. I think that's all the screws we're even going to need in this base is less than 260. So one of these constructors is going to make all the screws we need for the entire base. The next, and then doing the math on this, 260 screws, 5 beams. 5 beams is, 20 ingots, steel ingots, which is like 13 iron ingots. Whereas with the screws, 1 ingot is 1 rod, so 1 ingot is 4 screws. So you end up with quite a bit better of a ratio here. Using in the casted screws are pretty close to, like they're quite a bit better than the other, simply because you don't have that middle step. But as far as efficiency goes, the steel screws are just really good on the iron. Steel beams and steel pipes, of course, we can't change. Copper sheets, we're actually going to use a different copper sheet recipe here. We're going to use the steamed copper sheets that are, hopefully, yes, here. They, of course, require water. But like I said, we're going to be pumping a bunch of water up here anyway, so a little bit more water per minute. And we get 300 per pipe, so that's not even that much to worry about. But the fact that this is 3 copper to 3 ingots to 3 sheets, whereas this one is, come on thing, 2 ingots to 1 sheet, so you kind of get to 1-to-1 ratio here, plus the other one's a lot faster. So you need fewer machines, even though these only require 4 megawatts and the refineries require 30. Well, I guess it's probably less efficient, but the space is worth it as well. So that's what we're going to do for copper sheets. What else is in this machine? Wire, I was looking at all the choices for wire, and that's probably a kind of contested, because there's a couple of recipes that are pretty good, pretty close to each other, but I think the one I'm looking at is the fused wire, which actually isn't here. It's in the next building over. That one uses some Caterium and still mostly copper. So you end up with 4 copper ingots making 30 fused wire at a total of 90 per minute. You got to throw 1 Caterium in there, but that's still 5 ingots making 30 wire. So that's 1 to 6, and a 90 is the total rate. Whereas the regular wire, 1 ingot makes 2 wire. So instead of it being 1 to 6, it's 1 to 2, and you have 3 times the amount being produced here as well. Alternate iron wire isn't so bad. It's a little less efficient, but it uses iron instead of using copper, and iron is way more abundant than copper. So a lot of people rely on that recipe instead of this one, because they have so much iron and not as much copper or Caterium. But I have quite a bit of Caterium and copper available to me at this starting location, so it's not going to be a problem here. What else do we have here? Then we can go to this building. Cable. I think I was looking at... Let me see which one I was looking at, sorry. Cable. Where's it at? Where is it at? Why am I missing cable? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so the basic cable recipe that's made here is 2 wire makes 1 cable. That's a 30 parts per minute total output. And there are a couple of alternate recipes over here. Insulated cable and quick wire cable. There might be a 4th cable recipe, maybe not. No, I think this is it. So that was 2 to 1. This is 9 wire makes 20, so this is more like 1 to 2, a little bit faster than that, or a little bit more than that. Makes a lot more parts per minute. It does require the use of some rubber, but as you'll see when we get to looking at the oil product recipes, rubber is cheap. Speaking of recipes. Yes, ma'am. Okay, here's turbo fuel. Nuclear fuel units also is actually probably what I'm going to pick because I'm definitely going to use this. We may set up turbo fuel, or one of the turbo fuel recipes because we have the other one as well here. The one made from heavy oil residue. But I'm going to take the nuclear fuel unit because we're definitely going to use that one. And I'm still looking for a couple of recipes that I actually want for the bus here. Okay, so we were talking about cable. So that's 2 to 1, only making 30. This is like basically 1 to 2 plus a little bit of rubber. Even if you look at that, it's like 3 to 4, but it makes over 3 times as much. So it's a lot less machine usage, and rubber, like I said before, is going to be cheap. Once we look at that, you'll see that. Versus the quick wire cable, it's just too much quick wire for me. Deuterium's a little too precious, even though we're doing that that fused wire. This is too much deuterium for me, I think, and it's not as fast of a recipe either. And it's only slightly better ingredient-wise, so I am opting away from that one and going for the insulated cable. Concrete, we're going to do the wet concrete. I guess I can pull that one up here. The base concrete is 3 limestone is 1 concrete, and it produces at 15 per minute. Whereas the wet concrete over here is basically the concrete version of the pure ingots. 6 concrete, so instead of 3 to 1, it's 6 to 4, so it's more like 3 to 2. Uses the water, of course, and it makes 80 per minute instead of, what's the other one, 15? That's, yeah. So we're going to use that one. We basically need like 2 refineries making that, as opposed to a lot of these being made. Probably like 6 or 8. Let's see, quartz crystal. I think we're going to do the pure quartz as well here, so it's the same kind of concept. Let me check here. Hold on just a second. Yeah, pure quartz crystal. So 5 quartz makes 3 crystal at 22.5 per minute, whereas here with pure, a lot of recipes in the refinery. Hopefully they put a new building in to do some of these recipes that are here instead of it being a refinery thing, because it's kind of illogical. But it's 9 to 7 now, so that's quite a bit more output per raw quartz, but again, chucking the water in there. And this is much faster too, at 52.5 versus 22.5. So it's like more than twice as fast. Silica, there is a recipe called cheap silica. It's not really that cheap. I think, oh, this is 3 to 5. And the cheap silica, I think I have it, yeah, is 3 to 7. So it's a little bit of an improvement. Not a whole lot, but you have to chuck in a bunch of limestone to make it, which, to be fair, limestone is quite prevalent on the map. And in fact, we're probably not even going to use more than one of the 2 mines we have. But it doesn't produce that much more, 26.2 per minute versus 30. Actually produces less. So you end up with more machines just to get a little bit more benefit. So this one's not worth it to me. And was there finally here, or was that it for this one? This is all biomass stuff. Don't care. Don't care, don't care. And these are all effectively biomass things as well. We are going to make some empty canisters, but that's only just to just so that we have some fuel to be able to bottle. Everything else we've talked about here, so I'm going to take this out. That way we can signify that we're done. Reinforced iron plates. is it the bolted one? Yeah, a lot of people, especially early on in the game, they look for this one because it's fairly simple. It's iron plates plus screws. So as opposed to iron plates plus screws or iron plates plus screws, but it uses the same ingredients, but makes it a little bit faster at 15 parts per minute instead of 5, a little bit faster. And it's 6 to 1 and 12 to 1 here, as opposed to 18 to 3, which is still 6 to 1, and 50 to 3, which is what is that? 15, 16, 17, something, 16 or 17? Yeah, 16 and 2/3 or whatever. So it's actually a little bit worse productivity-wise, but getting triple the amount is sometimes worth the expense. So this is a decent one for people to set up early on. But in terms of, and then this one, the fact that it requires rubber is kind of frowned upon. Plus it's 3 to 1, so that's better, but it's a lot slower. It's only 3.8 per minute. So the best one though is the stitched iron plate. It's a little bit faster than the base recipe. It's not insane like this one is, but the fact that it uses so much less base materials, because it's 10 to 3, so it's just a little bit more than 3 iron plates instead of the 6 in the base recipe, and 20 wire is effectively, depending on which recipe you use, but it's effectively like 10 ingots, as opposed to all the screws, which are more like, I don't remember what the ingots were, but it's 10 ingots to 3, so it's more like 3 ingots each. So it's a lot better overall. And so most people will do, actually it's 5.62. Most people do this recipe as their preferred reinforced iron plate alternative. And then the modular frames, we've talked about these a little bit. The bolted one, I don't think is bad. It uses a little bit more iron overall, because instead of 12 rods, you go from 12 rods to basically like the equivalent of 14 rods, but it's so much faster at 24 seconds. So you get 5 parts per minute as opposed to 2 parts per minute. So that's a good one to go to when you are when you're looking at early game a little bit before you get to steel. If you get some hard drives early and you get that recipe, but once you get steel, this one's way more worth it. While it's not as fast as the other one, the amount of iron that it uses is greatly reduced per frame. So, so this is the one we're going to use here. Between encased industrial beams and encased industrial pipes, this is kind of a no-brainer. I think it's 2 beams per pipe, effectively. So this one is cheaper, and it's a little bit slower, I think. Yeah, it's a little bit slower, but it's a lot cheaper. No, it's more than 2 beams per pipe. It's like 5 to 3 or something like that. Like it's enough that it costs you less iron to make the encased industrial pipe instead of the encased industrial beams. I'd have to rebuild the constructor in order to see the recipe difference there, I think. Or maybe I could see it otherwise here. Let me pull up something real quick. Yeah, it's 4 steel ingots per beam, and it's 3 steel ingots per 2 pipes. So, but this one is 16 steel ingots per beam, and this one is 3 ingots for 2 pipes is like 9 or 10, maybe 10 ingots. So you can see there's a bit of a difference there. Even though it's slower, it's still quite a bit different, quite a bit better. We already talked about, or there's only one recipe for aluminum sheets, so that's that. There are 3 rotor recipes, and there's some contention between the copper rotor and the steel rotor as to which one is better. The vote for the steel rotor is because, well, it uses the same ingredients as the regular stator recipe, so it kind of simplifies your process a little bit. But in terms of overall efficiency and whatnot, the copper rotor is actually better, especially when you're making the steamed copper sheets and the copper alloy ingots and stuff, where you're kind of really spreading it around. Excuse me. And this is where the a lot of the screws. Actually, this might be where all the screws are going, in the base plan that I have. I think it is actually. Let me see real quick. Yeah. And my base plan isn't quite finished yet, which is why we're talking about recipes, just so that I can kind of go over with you guys what it is that I'm planning on doing, so that when we get to building the base, I can kind of just do it real quick. But this is the only place we're actually going to use screws is here. But it's just way cheaper per rotor to use this copper rotor. Overall, that is. The stator, I think I'm going to use the regular stator recipe. Am I? Or am I using the... Let me check which one I had planned to use. And I think in the next episode I'll actually show you the spreadsheet that I've done once I have it finished. But like I said, I don't have it finished yet. Okay, I'm not seeing my stator recipe. Ah, there it is. So I'm going to actually use the quick wire stator. It's a little bit cheaper and a little bit faster. It uses quick wire instead of copper wire, but we actually have enough Caterium that it's not going to matter. These three are gone now. We don't need to worry about them, but we do need to worry about hard drive. Electrode circuit board, I'm not interested in. This electromagnetic connection rod, I am interested in because it's part of the nuclear process. So we're going to go ahead and take this one. Oh, I should also talk about where I explored today. This whole area sort of here, I pulled, what was it, 10 hard drives or something out of there. So that's kind of where I explored. So the stator, it's a little bit slower, but in terms of the, it uses one fewer pipe per stator, because this one produces 2, and it produces, it uses one fewer wire, although it's Caterium wire, per stator. So it makes it a little bit more efficient. There is an alternate heatsink recipe. We don't have it yet. I'm assuming that I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to use it, but we don't have it yet. Like I said, those three I don't care about. Motor, there is a turbo something motor. I don't know if I have it yet or not. Oh, yes, the rigger motor. So it requires to be made here in a manufacturer because it uses a third ingredient, the crystal oscillators. But it's quite a bit more efficient. It's one rotor and one stator to 2 motors. Or, yeah, motors. So it's like 1 to 2 this way, plus the adding in of a half a crystal oscillator, or a fraction of a crystal oscillator per motor. Whereas in this one, it's 2 to 1. So it's quite a bit cheaper on the base ingredients, as long as you're willing to make that additional 1.25 crystal oscillators a minute, which is less than one manufacturer. So I kind of find it worth it. That also produces 7.5 a minute, whereas this is only 5, so it's a little bit better. Fused quick wire, we already talked about. AI limiters, it's only AI limiters. We spent some time talking about the silicon circuit boards versus the regular ones. There's a third one that we just turned down actually in the M.A.M. But the circuit board here is 2 copper sheets and 4 plastic. This takes the oil product completely out. It uses 1 extra copper sheet for the 5 silicone circuit boards, but it uses silica instead, which is kind of nice because we have those 2 pure quartz nodes that we're going to use barely any of. And then finally, this is 8 seconds for 1, so 7.5 per minute. This is 24 seconds for 5, so it's 12.5 per minute. So it's a little bit faster as well, which is nice. We talked about wire, talked about cable, fabric. I am going to actually automate the polyester fabric, which might be in the manufacturer, or is it in the refinery? I don't remember. We're going to actually make the polyester fabric so that I can automate the manufacture of the filters, and then the iodine infused filters for the uranium handling. I'm not going to bother with, or am I? Yes, I am actually going to do fine black powder. So the way this math works out is kind of funny. 2 sulfur plus 1 coal make 1 black powder. 2 sulfur plus 1 compacted coal make 4 black powder. 1 compacted coal is 1 coal and 1 sulfur. So this is basically 3 sulfur plus 1 coal in 2 machines, to be fair, makes 4 black powders. So that's a bit more efficient. Wait, is it compacted coal? Yeah. 5 coal, 5 sulfur, 5. So it's 1, 1, 1. And so that makes it a lot more efficient for making the black powder. And it's also faster too, I think. 15 versus 7.5. Yeah, so we need fewer machines. So it's kind of funny. If you do kind of do the math, you need to make 15 per minute, you need 2 of these machines. Or to make 15 per minute, you need 1 of these machines. And then you need 3.75 compacted coal. So then you need like 1 of these way downclocked. So I don't see the advantage in that you're also using less coal and less sulfur per obelisk or per fine black powder. So I don't see the disadvantage here. Other than having to set up 2 different recipes, but kind of a who cares thing. But on the side of the obelisks, we're just going to make the basic obelisk recipe. The other one is over here in the manufacturer. Because it requires crystal oscillators at 1.5 per minute, that's just too expensive for the amount of obelisks we actually use, which isn't a ridiculous amount. So, too expensive in terms of effort. So I'm just going to do that basic recipe here. Fine concrete I thought about, because it's silica plus limestone, but the wet concrete is a better, more efficient recipe. Cheap silica we talked about earlier. Crystal computer is one of the options for computers. The advantage of it being that you can make it in an assembler, but then you did a crap ton of crystal oscillators in order to make these. And those are made in manufacturers, so that's like 2 manufacturers worth to make 2.8 crystal computers. And the better computer recipe is over here. This is the base one, which produces 2.5 per minute, using a bunch of ingredients. But the Caterium one is 3.8 per minute. It uses circuit boards, which we're going to make out of silica, quick wire, and rubber, which is fewer oil-based ingredients than the basic one, and we don't need to make those crazy crystal oscillators. Either recipe we're going to actually use, which I think is the insulated one. It requires rubber versus the cable, but it's a lot cheaper, and it's also faster. This is 2 every 120 seconds, so 60 seconds a piece. This is 1 every 32 seconds, so that's almost half speed. And it also requires an AI limiter, but the amount of rubber and the amount of AI limiters per minute is so fairly little that we can actually compensate for it pretty easily. And I know I kind of skipped ahead hitting those, but since they were there and we were half talking about them anyway, I figured it was worth it. Where are we at? And then the last ones are the nuclear stuff. They're down here. We don't have all the alternates yet for the nuclear, but this one ends up being 2 versus 10, and this is 3 rotors versus 10 rotors, so you go from kind of 1.5 rotors per to 1.5 stators per to 1 stator per, and the high-speed connectors aren't that expensive versus the AI limiter. So I'm going to end up using this alternate recipe here. I think these, I just don't have the alternate for the encased uranium cells yet. Let me look at that. Encased. No, they're made over here. Okay. Oops. Uh-oh. I just messed myself up. Hold on. Okay. The encased, I think we picked that one up just a minute ago. Yeah. So this one's made here. But it's made using cheaper ingredients like sulfur and silica, although the quick wire Or no, is it just faster? Paste. Oh yeah, this is way cheaper ingredients. But it's 40 to 10, so 4 pellets making 1. And then a little bit of concrete versus this being 40 to 35, so it's a little bit cheaper. I honestly haven't decided if I'm going to use alternate recipes for nuclear or not. It's more of a demonstrative thing, so I'm trying to figure this part out yet. So I'm not sure which recipe I'm going to use. I haven't decided yet myself. I think that's all the recipes we had here, so we're going to delete that. And then we have what's left in the manufacturer. This episode's a bit longer than normal, but I think it makes sense to just cover all this in one episode, and that way in the next episode we can actually start rebuilding everything. We have the 2 heavy modular. We have the two beacons here. I see very little point in spending the additional craziness, on the crystal oscillator, because you need, well, half one, but to get beacons, which are only used really for making the cartridges. This one will do fine, and it uses cheap ingredients. So we're just going to use the regular beacon recipe here. The frames, this one's also kind of universally deemed to be better than the base frame. It's faster. It's 21 seconds-ish a piece, as opposed to 30 seconds a piece. It uses like half the amount of frames per. It's 8 for 3, so 2.3 instead of 5. It's 36 pipes, so 12 pipes each instead of 15. It's 3.33 encased industrial beams instead of 5, and it's 22, so like 7 concrete instead of 100 screws. So that's pretty much universally accepted to be the one you go with here. And here's the 2 more of the space elevator things. We talked about these already. Filters are just filters. There's no alternate recipe, but making the polyester fabric, wherever that's made, is going to be... it's made in a refinery. Okay. Is going to be worth it for us, because then we can actually automate it. And right now, the polymer resin, the blue chunky stuff, is actually kind of a byproduct that I would probably otherwise throw away. So it's kind of a win-win situation. We're going to also, on the high-speed connectors, we're going to use the alternate here, the silicone one, using silica instead of cable. It uses half the amount of Caterium wire, 56 versus like 30, a little more than half, but close enough to half for me. And it uses the same number of connection, what are they called? Circuit boards per high-speed connector, because this one makes 2 and that one makes 1. There's a turbo rigger motor that I don't have the recipe for yet. Hopefully we get that from the M.A.M soon. And then there are the 2 recipes for nuclear fuel units. The biggest advantage between the 2, while this one requires the crystal oscillators and the beacons, and this one does not, and instead requires the encased industrial beams, this one manufacturer making these will make enough for 2 nuclear plants. One manufacturer making these will make enough for 3 nuclear plants. So you kind of have a bit of bonus there, but in terms of, I haven't done all the calculations like I said, so I'm not sure whether this is going to be worth the effort of making the 0.6 crystal oscillators per minute and also the beacons. Hopefully I'll have that math worked out soon as well. So that is the manufacturer. And then I want to finalize. I also want to get a drink of water. Hold on just a second. I want to finish this episode by doing 2 things. One is just grab another recipe here. Caterium circuit boards. Oh, okay, that's another alternative. But since it requires Caterium and still requires plastic, that's not as good for me. And also the silicon one is much faster. So we're going to potentially skip that. And then there's also the compacted steel ingot, which is the third alternate that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about steel. It requires the compacted coal, which means it requires sulfur. So it's, I think if you do the math, it's not nearly as good, and it's definitely not as fast. So it doesn't matter which one of these I take. If I skip that one, I don't know. I'll take that one, I guess. All right. Well, there's half of our hard drives done that I've gathered. Okay. Where do I want to start here? Residual fuel. I don't think I'm gonna be using anywhere. I don't think so, because I think the better recipe. Well, let's start. I'm gonna skip these. I'm gonna skip these. We talked about these already. We talked about this already. We've talked about uranium. This electrode one that requires the coal, I don't think is worth it. Talked about this. Here's the polyester fabric that I mentioned a minute ago. This polymer resin is a byproduct for something that I will show in a moment. Basically, that I wouldn't use otherwise, except maybe to make more rubber or plastic out of. So I'm going to set this up and make this just for our, just for the purposes of our filters and stuff. So it's like one refinery or something making it. It's not a lot. And the coated cable we didn't talk about when we talked about cable. I forgot about this recipe. Actually, I think I mentioned that there was another recipe, but I didn't remember what it was. But making, I don't think it's not as fast. It's not really much more efficient per ingot, per wire for the cable. And then you have to bring heavy oil residue to wherever you're making it, or take wire to wherever you have the heavy oil residue. So it's not really worth it to me over the one we chose, which was the encased one, or the insulated one, or whatever it's called. So we've talked about this stuff. We talked about quartz crystal, I think. The uranium I haven't figured out yet. Sulfuric acid is just sulfur and water. There's no alternate. Actually, uranium pellets might be the only uranium pellet recipe. There might not be another one. So where I want to go here is recycled rubber and recycled plastic. These are kind of interesting because you're basically, by inputting fuel, there we go. By inputting some fuel, you're basically taking 6 rubber and making 12 plastic, or, oopsie, 6 plastic and making 12 rubber. So they kind of have a symbiotic relationship here, and you're kind of passing one to the other to back to the first one, and by including fuel each time, you're growing your rubber and plastic as much as you need to grow it. This is the polymer resin here. Produces a bunch of polymer resin and heavy oil, which we could use if we needed to use the polymer resin for things like residual plastic and residual rubber, but it's actually more efficient to use these recycled ones instead. These are the recipes we're using right now, which make plastic and rubber directly out of crude, and they're way less efficient, I think, than even the other ones. Oh, the sun glaring off of the thing. I was like, what the heck is that? So there are a few fuel recipes here. Let me see if I can figure out how this chain works. So in order to make fuel, we actually want the residual fuel recipe, which takes heavy oil residue and makes fuel out of it, I think. Or no, this one. This one's actually better. This also takes heavy oil residue and makes packaged fuel. So 1 heavy oil residue is 2 packaged fuel. Add in the packaged water, but water is basically free and unlimited, so it's not a big deal. And then you unpackage that to fuel to make 2 cubic meters of fuel. Whereas this one is 6, so that's 1 residual oil, heavy oil, makes 2 fuel. This is, however, 6 heavy oil makes 4 fuel. So that's a lot less efficient. And somewhere in here, find the recipe here. Oh, no. No, that's not it either. Where is the recipe at? Wally. The recipe that makes... this one here. Heavy oil residue. This takes crude oil and makes it into heavy oil residue with a byproduct here of polymer resin. So this is the polymer resin that I'm going to make into polyester to make into filters, which otherwise I would probably just throw it away. But so you take 3 crude oil, you make 4 heavy oil out of it, so that's 3 to 4, and then you take that 4 heavy oil. No. Diluted packaged fuel. Where's it at? Or am I missing it all the time? Oh, here it is. And then you take that 4 heavy oil residue and you make 8 diluted packaged fuel. And then you unpackage that fuel up here and you make 8 fuel out of it. The canisters end up just going back in the loop and being used for water that are then made into packaged fuel again. So you end up taking, is it 3 crude oil and making 8 fuel. And if you look at how much fuel these require, they require 6. So you're taking about 2 crude oil, and you're making either a net of 6. So you're making a net of 6 products. Whether it's converting 6 plastic to making 12 rubber, or 6 rubber to making 12 plastic, you're making a net increase of 6 products, because you can pass them back and forth, like I mentioned before, out of about 2 crude oil. Versus these that take 3 crude oil to make 2 plastic. So you can see the efficiency there is a lot less. And even with these and this alternate polymer resin recipe, you still end up with a lot less efficient plastic and rubber. The rest of these are just making, like I can take the biofuel and make it into liquid, which might be beneficial at some point, just to get rid of it more than anything else. Unpackaging is kind of thing. I may end up making this turbo heavy fuel, just out of compacted coal and heavy oil residue if we want to make it, or I may just make fuel and power some fuel generators with that. Petroleum coke, we've already looked at that recipe. We do need a little bit of that, so I'm going to siphon off some of that heavy oil residue to make petroleum coke. We don't need that much. It's just what we need here for making the aluminum, I think, is all we need. Unpackaging, fine. I don't know why this is unpackaging. That's kind of weird. It's weird where this is categorized. We're going to do packaging water, obviously, in order to do this recipe. But that's basically it for recipes here as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish today. I want to see if we have another hard drive done yet. It's 2 minutes away. I don't want to keep you all for 2 more minutes. So we're just going to pick up at the next episode, where we actually start to lay out, starting to lay out some of these smelting columns that we need for what will be the final base. But we'll start next episode by looking at the spreadsheet that I built and going over how that works. So thank you all for joining me for this extended episode of recipe review and planning and sort of a discussion. And feel free to give me any feedback you have in the comments on the recipes that I'm thinking about choosing, and or that I have chosen, and any other suggestions you might have as far as recipes. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.